former US president and the current Republican frontrunner Donald Trump threatened over the weekend that he was willing to let Russia do whatever the hell they want against NATO allies, specifically those allies who do not contribute sufficiently to NATO funds.
The Secretary General Stoltenberg, well, I don't know if he is anymore, but he was my biggest fan. He said all these presidents came in, they'd make a speech, they'd leave, and that was it. And they all owed money, and they wouldn't pay it. I came in, I made a speech, and I said, you got to pay up. They asked me that question. One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
His remarks stunned European leaders who were quickly discussing how they might prepare for a world in which America removes itself as the centerpiece of NATO, a 75-year-old military alliance. So far, the discussion in Europe has focused on whether the former President Trump, if he returned to office, would pull the US out of NATO. But the larger implication of his statement is that he could potentially invite President Vladimir Putin of Russia to pick off a NATO nation. And this could, in Trump's worldview, serve as a warning lesson to the 30 others who are part of this military alliance. Donald Trump made these remarks while he was campaigning in South Carolina Saturday. He said that while narrating this story when he was president back in 2018, he told the leader of a big-sized NATO country, he didn't name which country or which leader, that he would encourage Russia to do whatever the hell they want to those countries in Europe who had not paid the money that they owed to NATO. This is a story that Trump has narrated in the past as well, but this time its implications seem threatening on both sides of the Atlantic. His statement stunned many in Europe, all the more so after 3 years in which President Joe Biden has attempted to restore the confidence in the NATO alliance which was lost during Trump's time in office. Biden has repeatedly said that the US would defend every inch of NATO territory. A spokesman for the White House, Andrew Bates, denounced Trump's comments as unhinged. But within 24 hours, by Sunday morning, Trump's comments had already resonated with those in Europe who have argued that they cannot simply depend on the US alone to save them from Russia. Charles Michel, who's the president of the European Council, wrote in a Sunday morning article that reckless statements like the one that Trump made only serve Putin's interests. He also wrote that they make more urgent Europe's efforts to try and develop its own strategic autonomy and to invest in its own defense.
We have been advocating for doing more in defense, and that means that all the NATO's members do more in defense. They invest more in defense to boost the defense industry in order to be stronger together. So I think it still is the plea for everybody to do more. And I think what the presidential candidate in America says is also something to maybe wake up some of the allies who haven't done that much. So hopefully we all do more, and collectively we are stronger together.
In Berlin, Robert Röttgen, who is a member of the German Parliament and its Foreign Affairs Committee, he wrote on the social media platform X that everyone should watch this video of Trump to understand that Europe may soon have no choice but to defend itself. At the core of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and something that is enshrined in Article 5 of the treaty, is the promise of collective defense, that an attack on one member nation is an attack on all the nations. Trump has long complained about the amount that other countries in NATO spend on defense compared to the United States. He has repeatedly threatened to withdraw the US from NATO. But his comments on Saturday are the most direct indication that he does not intend to defend NATO from Russian attack if he was to be re-elected as president. Trump has for years inaccurately described how NATO funding actually works. NATO has a target that every member country has to spend a minimum of 2% of its GDP on defense. And most countries are not meeting that target. Sometimes even the US does not meet that target. But that figure is a guideline. It's not a binding contract. All of this is bound to dominate a meeting of NATO defense ministers that's going to happen this week in Brussels. That will be followed by the Munich Security Conference. That's an annual gathering of all national security leaders. That will be the following day on Friday. The US will be represented by Vice President Kamala Harris and Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and no doubt they will sure have a tough time reassuring their European counterparts. But that has not stopped re-evaluation among many European diplomats. It's been going on for a number of months now. It's the worst-kept secret of sorts, not referred to in public that very often, but something that everybody in Europe wants to be prepared for. Now, though, many are beginning to openly talk about it.
During this campaign, we will see and listen to many things. Let's be serious. NATO cannot be a la carte military alliance. Cannot be a military alliance that works depending on the humor of the President of the US on those days. It's not yes, now yes, tomorrow no, it depends, who are you? Now, come on, let's be serious. Let's be serious. NATO cannot be an alliance a la carte. It exists or it not exist. But I'm not going to spend my time comment any silly idea that comes during this territorial campaign in the US.
Germany's Defense Minister Boris Pistorius has begun talking about how Germany must prepare for the possibility of decades-long confrontation with Russia, that this war is not going to end anytime soon. The departing Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, said last week that the alliance had to prepare for a decades-long confrontation with Russia. And right after Trump's statement, Mr. Stoltenberg put out a statement on Sunday where he said that any suggestion that allies will not defend each other undermines all of our security, including that of the US, and it puts American and European soldiers at increased risk. Denmark's Defense Minister, Troels Lund Poulsen, has also said that within 3 to 5 years, Russia may test NATO's solidarity by attacking one of its weaker members. He says the attempt would be to fracture the alliance. And in Finland, there is now a new leader who's been elected, and just as he is confronted with the war at his doorstep between Russia and Ukraine, and also whether or not Finland, along with Sweden, will be accepted as full-fledged members of NATO, now he has to contend with a new and a bigger problem, and that is the prospect of Donald Trump returning to the White House and what its implications may be to his own country and also to the military alliance that has been guarding Europe for the last 75 years. At its very core, the argument that is underway in Europe goes to the question of whether members of the alliance can be assured of the US nuclear umbrella. Remember, the nuclear protection that the United States offers its allies in Europe is the ultimate deterrent against Russian invasion. The question before many European members is, will that nuclear umbrella, that deterrent, continue to cover all 31 members of the NATO alliance? Because in Europe, Britain and France, they have their own very small nuclear arsenals, but that's about it. No other country in Europe has a nuclear umbrella. So it is American nuclear protection that has acted as a deterrent for all these years against the kind of large-scale attack that Russia has inflicted upon Ukraine. But here's the rub. Over the next year, if NATO's European members doubt that the United States is committed to Article 5, which is protection of one is protection of all, or an attack on one is an attack on all, and thereby everyone in the group is mandated to protect that one member who's been attacked, the question that's on top of European leaders in their minds is that American security guarantee still going to be in place? Because if it isn't, then there's going to be an inevitable fallout. And that fallout is it's going to revive the debate in Europe as to who all need their own nuclear weapons. And when that debate starts, it will start with Germany, the biggest economy in the European Union. Germany, for the last 75 years, since the end of the Second World War, has steadfastly remained committed to non-proliferation. But if the United States dumps NATO and dumps its European partners, then Berlin will have no choice but to pursue nuclear weapons. For the last 7 decades, the United States helped tamp down such nuclear sentiments in Europe by basing American nuclear weapons across the European continent. Those nuclear weapons are still there, and there are no plans to change that. But the value of that deterrent has come under question as Trump, both publicly and privately, has been asking his aides that America needs to withdraw from NATO as far back as early as 2018. And whether Trump wins in November or whether he loses to Biden, the fact that such an insular vision of NATO has taken hold of the imagination of both Europeans and Americans alike, that is the most worrisome part. That is a shift which is bound to affect the future of the transatlantic alliance in Europe for many, many more years to come, far more than the current conflict that's been going on between Russia and Ukraine.